Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast, episode number 266 of the show. I got 7 new reviews for you this week, and in our news section, a metric ton of plagiarized stories to be on the lookout for, a huge long list we'll talk about later. I also want to mention that I'm okay. I know it's been a few weeks since I've done an episode of the podcast and the show. I've got a few concerned messages on Facebook from listeners saying, "Hey man, I haven't seen you in a while posting anything for the podcast. You doing okay, buddy?" I had a message back saying, "Yeah, hey, thanks for being concerned. Just getting busy, with work. I do writing for a living, and I got a family that's been home for this whole coronavirus thing, and everybody's at home, and so spending time with them, taking care of our 2-year-old." So that's just living life, enjoying it, and finding a hard time to read is challenging. I'm only getting like 2 or 3 books a week, so I've just been waiting until I have enough for a decent sized podcast episode. So that's why I have 7 for you this week. But I'm okay. Thanks for your concern, everybody. Feel free, if you really care, to share the podcast so we get new listeners and watchers and viewers, or you can direct them to the LitRPG podcast website. But thank you for your concern, folks. It's very touching. Okay, as far as the new reviews go this week, we got Death Forever Warlock 2 by the amazing Charles Dean that we reviewed this week. Beta test book 1, the first NanoWielder Saga, which was actually a request from the author to review this. Then there's also Second Shot Fantasia book number 1. Also ChronoTemplar, the Crunchy LitRPG adventure. Also Breaking the Bank, Lux Voice book number 3. Also He Who Fights the Monsters book number 2. And oh great, I was Reincarnated as Farmer, a LitRPG adventure, Unorthodox Farming book number 1. So all kinds of stories out that we'll be talking about a little bit. Before we do that, we're going to LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we have a couple of, a few stories that are absolutely 100% plagiarized. Here they are. I gotta drop back into suggestion mode though. There we go. So there's a pictures of the actual plagiarized stories, some of the cover arts, which are also stolen, of course. But we are able to recognize this particular group or person who's doing this because they're doing the same way to try to get around Amazon's automatic scan system. And so instead of uploading a Word doc, it looks like they're uploading as a PDF or as a file, but they're as a scan of the book and then rotating it like 90 degrees, so it comes in sideways. And so I don't know why they would do this. It makes it unreadable, and so nobody's really going to go past the first couple Kindle Unlimited pages. But hey, even a couple of those over the course of multiple books might get them a few pennies, dollars. I don't know. But it's all free since they didn't actually do any work for it. So that is what the case is. But we have books that really just span multiple authors. This has been going for a little bit of a time. Just in looking into this the past couple of weeks for the show here, I have a list of 39 plagiarized stories. And it looks like they're usually a title that they're ripping from, and then they're doing 2 or 3 different versions of it with different title names, but it's the exact same text, exact same scan text. And again, because they decided, and it is pretty unique, being able to compile a pretty decent list of stuff. It includes Reality Vendors book number 1, World of Change book number 2 and 3, the Rogue Dungeon book number 2 and 4, the Underpower Howard, Game of the Gods, the How to Kill a God, Stonehaven League book number 7, Paradise Clash, Bounty Hunter. Also, Syphal's Song, which is an older LitRPG story. Also, War in the Greenwood, and Orc Spawn Betrayal. And there are actually a few other stories I couldn't quite figure out who they belong to. Either I hadn't read them personally, or I couldn't do any search information on copying text from the story itself or from the novel description, and finding them. So if you want to take a look at the links in the show notes that we're going to be on the full LitRPG podcast page for this podcast, and if you see if you can find the authors, let them know that their stuff is there, or if you can, just let us know at the podcast. You can always email us at feedback@geekmindspodcast.com, or you can email us at litrpgpodcast@gmail.com. Either way, we'll get to us, or find us on Facebook. We always like messages. But I've tried to notify the authors in question or the publishers to let them know that this has occurred, and hopefully they'll be taken down soon if possible. But if you find a book on this list, hey, here's some information so you can take care of that. Okay, on the stuff that is out now, that's going to include Ruins of Camelot, a new story. So it's going to be looks like it says the 4th book in the introduction cycles. So there you go. We have Gamified, book 2 of the Player versus Player series. We have Thief's Bounty, LitRPG Dungeon Core Adventure, Dungeons of Evolution, book number 1. We have Prince of Power, LitRPG Cultivation. We have Hexrolled Roll, first book in that particular series. We have the 3rd book in the Apocalypse Cosmos series. We have the 5th book in the Bone Knight series. We have the 2nd book in the Sage series. The 2nd book also of the Intellectium series, which is a Russian translation story. We have book 3 in the Dungeon Slayer series. We also have, I think is the 3rd, maybe 4th book in the I'm a Bad Guy World Domination series by Simon Asher. We have Trial, which is the 2nd book of the VR Hero series. The 3rd book in the Warlock Chronicles series is also out. The 3rd book in the Beastborn Chronicles is out for you to enjoy. Book 6 in the Rogue Merchant series is out. The Defiance of Fall of the Fall is out. Apparently, this was a web novel, and it's been put on Amazon, much to the delight of a lot of readers. Also out is the 3rd book in the Weight of It All series called Everwood. The 8th book in the Nora Online series is out. The 1st book in the Ocean Slayers Racing series. So, yeah. And Tower Climbers, book number 3. These are all stuff that is out currently for you to enjoy if you haven't had a chance to pick them up or check them out or if you like them. And audiobooks, more stuff for you. Defiance of the Fall, which we already talked about. Beastborn, book number 2 is out. The True Smithing is out as an audiobook. Tales of the Northblood, Winter's Breath is out. God's Choice, Sigma Worlds, book number 5 is out. Goblin Seminary, Deck Building RPG. Dungeon Walkers, book number 1. New Plus, Noobtown, book number 5 is out. Savage Dominion. Also, The Call of Forces, The Heavenly Throne, book number 4 is out. Labyrinth of Fright, Underdog, book number 5. Also, the Realm Between series, book number 7 is out. Artificial Jelly is out. Condition Evolution, book number 3, and also the Ozymandias Apocalypse, book number 1. So plenty of things for audiobook LitRPG listeners to enjoy. Okay, stuff that's coming out in the near future. We have a bunch of things. There's going to be reading stuff out for you to enjoy. On June 14th, it'll be The Deepest Dungeon, book number 2. June 15th, it'll be a short story in the System Apocalypse universe called Adventures in Clothing. A new Viridian 8 Online series will be out on June 15th called Resurrection, the first book in the Heartfire Healer series. The 2nd book in the Savage Dominion series will be out on June the 15th to the delight of many. Also, Terramar Online and Undiscovered Country, June 22nd. June 29th, it'll be Primacy Online, book number 6. June 29th, it'll be Underverse, book number 5. June 30th, True John Crusade. I believe this is the 2nd book in the series, which is an RPG Apocalypse series. On June 30th, it'll be Prison of the Gourmet, Black Flame Online. June 30th, it'll be The Good Guys, book number 12. July 1st, rather, Evil Burn, book number 4. July 1st, it'll be Cyber Magazine Realization. July the 1st, the 4th book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. I'm looking forward to reading that. On July the 2nd, it'll be The Sleepless Ones, book number 7, Clan Dominance. July the 12th, it'll be the 8th book in the Reality Bender series. July the 12th, Dinosaur Dungeon 2. July the 13th, World of Magic, book number 1. July the 18th, Iseki Magus, book number 3. July 20th, the 2nd book in the Hexroll series. July 20th, They Call Me Matter. July 27th, Frost, Ice, and Blood. July 27th, it'll be The Player Reaches the Top, book number 6. July 30th, Tower of Steel and Shadow. July 31st, The Merchant System, book number 2. August the 2nd is going to be the 2nd book in the Dungeon of Evolution series. August the 2nd will be Bushido Online, book number... Oh, golly, I think this is 4. Yeah, this is 4. They don't say in the actual Amazon text for the title. August the 9th, it'll be Discardian, book number 8. August the 10th, Magnus, book number 2. August the 10th, Defiance of the Fall 2. On August the 12th, Bad Guys, book number 7. August 24th, The Mad Elf, book number 1. August 24th, Captains in Canyons, book number 2, Cannons. And August 25th, Rogue Merchant, book number 7. So all kinds of new things for you to look forward to in the future. But on to new releases and reviews. Okay, first review of the week is going to be Death's Favorite Warlock, book number 2, written by Charles Dean. It is 340 pages, $3.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. Kill after kill, Lars's bloody hands have grown stronger by the day as he's soaked in the EXP from every cultivator whose life he's taken. What was once horrific is now becoming an addiction. But just getting strong enough to survive was only the start. When an elder cultivator powerful enough to destroy Lars with a gesture spirits him away to the sect in the spring rain, he ends up as a subject of a twisted plot to uncover and exploit his secret cultivation technique. Can he navigate the treacherous power struggles of the sect within, or will he be killed off by the factions vying for power? What happens if his grisly methods are exposed? One thing is for certain, he must prove once again that you shouldn't mess with a warlock who grows more powerful with every life he takes. So there we go. And this is a Zanzia cultivation LitRPG gamelet kind of story. Big mix there. Full disclosure, I received advanced copy for review when I purchased a copy when it became available. This is such an easy review and simple. Lars is back. He's delving deeper into this cultivation world, and he's trying to join a martial arts sect, and there's essentially some drama with that. There are always good fights in this story. I think a lot of the story is going to be dialogue and banter, and it's humorous and it's very entertaining. But you have to understand that this is apparently going to be a 5-book series. And so the story is stretched out a little bit more as far as like arcs go. And so there's some good stuff here. The main character gets new powers. He has an RPG set. There's RPG progression. Likes a lot of good talking and humor stuff there. And as long as you like all that, you should enjoy this, especially if you liked book number 1 in the series. Again, it's very cultivation and Zanzia kind of heavy, so you have to be okay with that as well. But as far as it goes, entertaining read for me. It's not quite entirely my wheelhouse. I'm not as into cultivation as some other people. So for me, it still gets a good score, 7.5 out of 10. But if you like cultivation, if you're a fan of cultivation and you like good action and good sense of humor, and you like the tropes you see in those kind of stories, you'll probably like this even more than I did. But for me, good, solid, middle of the road, good 7.5 out of 10 for Death's Favorite Warlock, book number 2. Okay, next is going to be Beta Tester, first book of the NanoWielder Saga, written by Martin Lambert. It is 225 pages, $3.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. Monsters are real, magic works. It's a dry run for the apocalypse. Will you survive the beta test? The wild places have become more and more dangerous as animals and plants have become altered. Some are larger, some exhibit strange powers, but many are dangerous. Cody, a down on his luck veteran of the U.S. Army, goes to the forest to die. He's going to earn an insurance payout for his family and help protect some of the countless squatters forced from their homes when automation took their jobs. It will be a good death. That isn't quite the way things work out. The artificial intelligence thinks it is operating a game. The players are the residents of the forest. They all undergo forced character creation and try to survive while learning their new powers. Cody's determined to break out of the test zone and build a team that work closely together to survive the new game-like reality. So there we go. And there's a little bit about, this is a thing with the game stuff. Okay. I almost like this. It didn't end up working for me, and there are a few issues that I had with it. They kind of just brought it down to a level of like, I don't quite enjoy this, unfortunately. There were aspects that I really actually enjoyed. There's good action in this story. There is regular fights just about every single chapter. And there is a certain depth to the RPG system. I believe I've seen portions of it here and there, but for the most part, the main character gets this Templar kind of build, healing. There is a little bit of element of faith in the story that's sprinkled in. That's not a major like big element of like it being like a religious story in any way, shape, or form. It is very much RPG apocalypse. And those aspects, like I said, nicely done. But there are a few issues again that kind of turned me off as a reader, and I'll talk about those now. One of the early issues for me is the fact that the beginning of the story is just a major info dump, and it takes like 14% of the story, which is about 35 pages, before you get to any action or really the main character in the story. A big chunk of that earlier part is setting up of the like this huge background section of like the AI who's going from the game world to for some reason controlling the entire world secretly and spreading nanites everywhere, which is just kind of the fundamental justification of why there's an RPG apocalypse. I don't ever think you really need that much explanation, that many pages to explain why these things occurred, honestly. But that's the author's choice. I don't take away from him. It is just a lot of text to kind of get through before you get to, the some of the good actiony stuff that happens and the stuff from the main character's point of view, because all that other stuff is told from kind of the third person God point of view. And even among them, there was another aspect that I genuinely disliked, and it was like there are a few scenes in the story where it's super dark. Like in one scene, this is minor, no spoilery. A mother gets home for early for dinner, for work, and she, because she's playing the game, for some reason, which is never really explained how this happens or why, she's turned into a monster. And she, not just like a human monster, but like this almost like griffinish beast. And she kills her family graphically. Her husband, her two small children, are graphically murdered in the text of the story. And this happens again in reverse, where the kid is killing his parents or one of his parents and later on in the story. And those things are just super dark. And I was like, I genuinely dislike them. And I don't see the point of them existing there. I'm not questioning the author's artistic license and doing what if they want to. No, it's more the fact I had to think about this a second why it just disliked it. Might be because I'm a parent, but further I think it's because the tone isn't carried through. The dark tone isn't carried through the entire story. If it was like a super dark story, and I've read super dark stories where like everybody's evil. There's certainly terrible things that happen and it's super gruesome. And if that was this kind of story, I would understand that. I'd definitely appreciate that because it's tonally consistent. But in this particular story, it's not. They're just, most of the story has the RPG apocalypse with people who are essentially kind, good people. There are very few like bad people in this story. Most of the people who are down on their luck, they're living in the forest. They're just trying to survive by. They're helping each other out. They even risk their lives for completely and utter strangers. And so the world is honestly much kinder than I think it should be as an RPG apocalypse. Except for like those few scenes that are just like super dark, and they could have been done without the graphicness or changes there if the author just needed to show that people could be turned into monsters as opposed to all the like regular animals in the world that have been modified to be super big, which are the other monsters in this world, or the humans that get RPG powers. And it just felt distracting because these dark moments distracted from or otherwise a generally like friendlier kind of RPG apocalypse, which is the theme for most of the story. So that definitely bothered me and took away some of my enjoyment. The game mechanic side of things are actually pretty decent. Again, it's a little info dumpy in the beginning of the story. The main character is doing his character creation, and a lot of it's not really explained for like the author intends to make some of the game mechanics, like the actual powers and how they work and their limitations, shown through the text as the main character uses them. But there's still a huge chunk of stuff that's in the front of the story that could have been spread out a little bit, I think. But it is in depth, and if you like numbers and you like that kind of thing, which I generally kind of do personally, which is why it's not a big deal for me, this exists. And again, the main character has healing powers. It's a combat class. It's a Templar, I believe, or Crusader. I forget which one it is. And he has a companion dog, which is always cute. I don't think it's done terribly well here. The dog doesn't do too much speaking, just some mind talk for like a sentence here and there. But it's always nice to have an animal companion, and the main character does regular RPG progression. Although you can see there are a few mechanics in the story that are kind of fleshed out as the story continues, especially the nano credit thing, which is done throughout the story. It's just like, oh, he doesn't really do things for a long time with this. So it is what it is. Overall, calm in the story is again good. There's a variety of monsters. For me, it just wasn't enough to carry the story through. A lot of the characters felt they weren't really fleshed out for me. The main character probably has the most depth to his character, but even then I wasn't super engaged in his survival. I could empathize with his particular like depressed situation and that was described in the novel description. But for me, even now, it's just like, okay, this is enough for me to like not want him to die, but not really be invested in his success and understand why he's doing all the things that he's doing necessarily in the story, I guess. And again, the bigger issue for me was just like the dark scenes that were a big turnoff because I'm always like, go full dark apocalypse or just don't do it because it becomes a distraction. And it really was for me. And there really wasn't much of the story as far as on a story level, like why this is occurring, a plot system, plotting devices that carry my interest through from us. For me, it just missed a bit. So it's going to get a 6 out of 10 for me. But if like those issues that I mentioned aren't going to bother you, you'll probably like the story like you generally will. There are a lot of people who've enjoyed this book at the time of this recording. There's like over 70 positive reviews. So definitely check it out if you feel like something on the RPG Apocalypse side and you don't mind the things that I did. But for me, it gets a score 6 out of 10. That's beta test the first of the NanoWielder Saga with a score of, again, 6 out of 10 for me. Okay, next up is going to be Second Shot Fantasia, book number 1, written by Simon Vale. It is 461 pages, $3.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. I was on a date with the girl of my dreams when life took a strange turn, and I found myself sucked into a virtual game world. It was pretty much a nosedive out of my own world of comforts where I had everything, money, love, and a bright future on the horizon. I'm not a gamer, and I've never been one to run from reality, but it seems fate has decided that my real life no longer belongs to me. Now I'm rotting away in some dumpy medieval village where everyone I meet wants to kill me. But I won't give up, and I won't lose hope. I'll get to the bottom of this. What's it all for? Who's the mastermind behind it? I don't plan on just rolling over and accepting any gift fate wants to bestow upon me. And if I have to turn this whole darn world around inside out, so be it. Okay, there we go. Full disclosure, I received advanced copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. Okay, this is a Russian translation story that adds a twist to the trapped in the game format by making the main character a scanned copy of a real person uploaded to the game without their permission. The game world is a PvP centric for player versus player, with the added permadeath since all the players are just scanned copies. I wanted to like this story. I did. It just didn't really work out for me. And not that it's poorly written. It has some interesting concepts in here. But even the author, like when he was like promoting this online, he's like, this is a little weird. It may not be for everybody. And that's an honest, it's an honest evaluation of your own work when you're trying to promote it to people you want to buy it. And for me, it just didn't miss. And it's mostly because I didn't see much of a clear plot or point to a lot of the story up until about 60% mark. After that point, it gets real interesting. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're finally getting a plot and we're getting some good development. And I was really invested up until the point till the end. And I like that section. And then suddenly it's like, oh, okay, it's just that up until that point, I'm like, oh, okay, this interesting thing here, interesting mechanic here. I'm like, I guess I'll hang out to see how this is going, but I'm not super invested. Or it was hard for me to like stay attentive to the story because while there were interesting points, and I definitely appreciate the PvP focus of the story, there just didn't seem to be like an ultimate goal, and it kind of even took too long to explain the setup of the story. Like the first 10% is honestly a little confusing to get through, and that 10% is like the sample section of this novel, and it takes just that long just to set up the premise, which is in the novel description. And once you do, you're like, oh, okay, I see what's happening now. Now it's a lot clearer. I can continue forward, understanding that this is the thing that people are being scanned in without the permission, and they're being set against other players who are just playing the game. And there's a PvP system, and people are trying to like, survive and live, and players trying to kill them, and that kind of thing. And it's essentially trapped in a game story. And so, but between that point and the 60 mark, it's mostly just like slice of life where the main character is going on these, he's trying to escape the players who are trying to enslave him and other newbies, figuring out the game system, leveling up, recruiting allies to fight monsters and get other players. He eventually reaches a large community, gets involved in. There's a whole expansive thing there of him trying to contact himself in the real world to try to work things on that end, to figure things out. And that all exists, and it's there, but it never really felt like, oh, there's an ultimate goal for this story. There's like any real like plot development, just like a lot of like mini adventures, which is perfectly fine. It's just, it's just hard to stay interested for me for some reason, until again, that 66% mark, when there there's an actual plot development, and it's a big one. And it's like, oh, this is the thing behind why all this happens, and the creators of the system and the real purpose of the game. And it made the stuff that came after it have purpose. And that made it interesting, especially with the town defensive that comes out. And it just took way too long to kind of get to the really interesting stuff. And I don't think that everybody's going to want to wait like I do, or is willing to read through all that before it gets to like the really, really good part. The game mechanics side of things, nothing really innovative, nothing really bad. It's just okay. It's a solid RPG progression. It's regularly shown. Smart combo spells, smart group tactics. A lot of it getting focused around PvP. So you get the variation of those particular combination of skills and tactics in defending and warding against. Again, I mentioned there was some town defense later on in the story. So if you're really into PvP, this might be enough to get you interested in the story. I'm not a super big on PvP myself, though. Overall, again, unless you're into PvP early or you like the group fights early on, it's a challenge just to see where the story is going until you're almost done with it. And again, there is some good stuff after that 66% mark that kept me interested. But again, I found it challenging to stay engaged with the story up until that point. Unfortunately, for me, it is a miss, but it's nearly good for me. It's just that the majority of the story is like, okay, this is just kind of okay. So I'm going to give it a 6.8 out of 10 just because it's almost good for me, but unfortunately it's just kind of a miss. So almost good, but it kind of a miss. That second shot, Fantasia, book number 1, with a score of 6.8 out of 10. And next up is ChronoTemplar, a currently liberated adventure written by Bert Renlaw. It is 431 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. You don't always get a second chance unless you're a pawn for an eldritch horror that A, can bend time, and B, is a sore loser. Just in Time is not a good man, nor one destined for glory. He was meant to die in obscurity, yet another level 82 Templar that was just about to get chewed up by a horde of skittering monstrosities clawing at humanity's last enclave. One short conversation with the time-splitting monstrosity later, and Justin finds himself flung 5 years into the past, right when the Earth was first chosen to host the 9,947th Gladiator Games. Justin must now do all he can to help save the world from crumbling under the twin pressures of monsters and murderers. But it's not all grinding experience, getting the most levels and kicking the most ass. He can't even stand out too much lest he draw the attention of the other eldritch horrors observing Earth's struggles for their amusement. No, it's all about making the right connections, sowing the seeds of hope, and culling the pests causing despair. Oh, and exploring the hell of the system with his borrowed ability to tweak time to his advantage. Okay. The first 25% of the story is an absolute slog. But it gets better. It really does. After the 20% mark, the story loses a lot of the things that issues with, and it continues on to be like interesting and well developed, and it essentially redeemed itself for me. So I enjoyed it overall. It's just that the first section of it is challenging structurally and storytelling wise, and I'll get into why. The first 10% of the story, absolutely tedious. No way about it. It sets up a regressive story using an alien that lost a bet on how long humanity would last on their instigated RPG apocalypse to send the main character back in time to help people do better. Then once back on Earth, at the very start of the RPG apocalypse, it's a huge info dump about game mechanics instead of any kind of emotional response or character development with somebody who's gone back in time to the very start of the RPG apocalypse. And that was probably my biggest issue with like the first 10% particularly, but also the first 25%. I think there's a huge amount of info dumping of like specific mechanics, the main character knowing a bunch of stuff about the classes and the information and just kind of regurgitating it to the reader. Eventually that tapers off, and that the author's writing style changes to showing instead of just like this blocks and blocks of text about, oh, this is the class, this is what it's possible for them to do. Not that they're necessarily going to do it, but just for your reader, just so you know they can. or like just, pages and pages of information on their items and all their items, or like multiple pages of every single change to a character sheet. Or I should say, there's one change, like you get new powers, a new power level, whatever. But you see all the previous text. I'm like, oh, you probably didn't need to have all that text information there. 7 pages of or 2-3 pages of class information every single time he levels when there's only like one change, or like one skill up. And a lot of that happens repeatedly in the story. But after that 20% mark, it's a lot better. It's a lot less info dumpiness. The story still does some minutia sometimes, but a lot of that goes away. The fights are really good throughout the entire story as the main character gets a team and he faces foes that are his equal, and that doesn't really occur until after the 25% mark as well. Before that, he's really dominating, and it's not really a challenge at all for any of the stuff that he's doing. And a lot of the story actually revolves about not just him like fighting PvP characters or players who are taking him under the apocalypse to the expanded experience of killing people instead of monsters. But there is a bit of like him seeing like the timeline and how it's changing. And I think I like that aspect the most, because in a lot of regression stories, you don't get that larger view of how someone who travels back to the past can change the world on a large scale. And even though like it isn't always explained the best and like how the main character knows this information, it is conveyed to the reader that the main character does change the future from how it was in the past, and he's having these positive moments, and how the Earth is having a better chance to survive against like this RPG apocalypse that's brought upon for the amusement of aliens in like waves of monsters and stuff. And there's a lot of like good details about how its system works and all on the RPG side of things. That's all really well done. But I think I like that aspect the best, and that you get to see a kind of a wider view of how the world changes because of what he's doing, how he's conveying the best way to level, the best way to fight, the best ways to the right people, and then it's spreading gradually, and countries are combining, and there are specific things happening, and how that benefits them, and how that conversely changes the difficulty level of the RPG apocalypse and the corresponding effects of that. All really good stuff. I really enjoyed all that, but it just takes a little while to kind of get to that good stuff, about 25% or so. So the story itself, a little rough on times, but in the beginning, but again, it redeems itself for me, and I really got into it, and I really had a good time with it. So if you find yourself struggling in the beginning, just know that it does get better. And I think most people really enjoy this RPG apocalypse story with, the main character who has an ability to travel back in time. If he has some like time regression powers as well. So good stuff. Gonna get a score of 7.2 out of 10 for me. Loses a few decimals because of that hard, rough start, but overall had a good time with it. ChronoTemplar, a crunchy liberty adventure with a score of 7.2 out of 10. And next up we have Breaking the Bank, Lux Voice Book number 3, written by Daniel Schiedhofen. It is 500 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. Doc was happy with his new life. He'd married Fiala and Sonia, had allies who were steadfastly beside him, and was building the name of Lady Luck. Things were moving in the right direction, and life was good. Powerful enemies were starting to rise against him. Doc knew that Sheriff Grange and McKellen and the Preacher of Abac would be problems eventually, but the two he had to deal with first were Suez and Goodman. Suez was still a mystery to Doc, and the man had effectively split the town with Goodman. Goodman was a larger concern, being the head of the only bank in town and the mayor of Deep Gulch. Doc's lucky strike in the wild helped give him the leverage in town. Using the woodfall from his mine, he moved to break the town free from the deep pockets that had it in a stranglehold. When Leah, Ayla, Sophia, and his wives left town to work on their outdoor knowledge and shooting, Doc was left to mind the lily and keep healing the wounded. He thought things would be fine until Spot, one of the deputies, came stumbling mortally wounded. Pushing himself more than he should, Doc poured his energy, vitality, and his life into saving Spot. Darkness coalesced around him as he used almost everything he had to bring the deputy back from death's door. Wow, this is really long for a novel description. After escaping death by the barest of margins, Doc had no idea what was coming next for him, but he had faith that his goddess would help see him through it. And there's really large warning saying it contains adult situations, sex gambling, drug abuse, drug use, harem, murder, and also graphic sex scenes and elements of BDSM. So there you go. I'll be honest, the novel description is longer than my review. The review is fairly simple. It's a fine continuation of the Slice of Life series. I, in particular, really enjoyed the backstabbing section. It's a nice bit of intrigue. It had some really good twists in that section there. There's also a lot of tying off of loose story threads in here because you can see the main characters planning to leave town, though that doesn't actually happen in the book. So overall, though, entertaining to read. Again, usual warning about there being sex scenes and polyamorous relationships in the story, just FYI. The only thing that kind of took it down for me is just there's never as much RPG progression here as I would like in general. Like the other elements of the story, character development, humor, action. In this case, even the intrigue was really nicely done. I'm super big into the RPG aspects of these story worlds, and that wasn't really developed here, unfortunately. But still, good, entertaining story. Good score 7.3 out of 10. That's Breaking the Bank, Lux Voice, book number 3, with a good score of 7.3 out of 10. Next up, we have He Who Fights Monsters, book number 2, a little bit adventure written by Shirtaloon. This is 564 pages, $5.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. The path from retail, middle management to interdimensional wizard adventurer wasn't easy, but Jason Asano is settling into his new life. Now a contest draws young elites to the city of Greenstone to compete for a grand prize. Jason must gather a band of companions if he is to stand a chance against the best the world has to offer. While the young adventurers are caught up in competition, the city leaders deal with revelations of betrayal as a vast and terrible enemy is revealed. Although Jason seems uninvolved, he has unknowingly crossed the enemy's path before. Friends and foes made along the way will lead him to cross it again. Inevitable conflict looms. There we go. Pretty good novel description. This is the second book in the series and will sell very entertaining. It also very much shows that it's taken from a serial story and it's not fully plotted out, at least for this novel. Like there are definitely these mini plotted adventures, but overall you see that it sometimes just kind of wanders off into these little side quests or these little side like long dialogue sections. And it's entertaining, but it's like, oh, you can see that it's not exactly plotted out. It's a serial story, which means that it's released in chunks and chapters on a regular basis online, and then it's kind of collected in a section that can be considered like one or several story arcs. So it is that's a part of what the story is. Though a portion of the story, there's a big mid-adventure into subspace that is clear goals, quests, and character growth. Most of the story isn't as well plotted out. It feels very much more slice of life. Not to say it's not structured, as again, just looser fights, good banters, casual sightseeing. There's several story threads that were started in this novel that aren't ended or don't actually have much development. And again, that also matches the slice of life storytelling. And it's likely these threads are going to be developed in other books, just not here. Besides those small points, though, the story on the whole continues to be very full of action, adventure, power development, and the addition of more reasonable romance options allow for some fun, playful banter in the group. Good stuff overall. Had a good time with it. Gets a score of 7.6 out of 10. I enjoyed it. I really did. A lot of people love it as well. That's He Who Fights Monsters, book number 2, with a score of 7.6 out of 10. And next up we have, oh great! I Was Reincarnated as a Farmer, a Liberty Adventure, Unorthodox Farming, book number 1, written by Benjamin Carey. It is 660 pages, $5.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. What do you have when you blend a pinch of LitRPG, a touch of farming simulator, and a sprig of epic fantasy, and a whole cup of Isekai, which I'm probably saying wrong, and a dash of Home Alone? Isekai. I don't know. You have Arnold's life. Accidentally murdered by a cleric in another universe during a botched resurrection, Arnold, a semi-programmer, wakes up upon an altar to find himself incarnated into the overweight body of a farmer who could have been his fatter twin. He's not the hero. He's not the villain. He's certainly not the chosen one who is there to save the world. He's a clerical error. It could have been a bad joke, but apparently it happens so often that they have a standard procedure for returning you. That standard procedure does not apply to Arnold. Now stuck on a new Earth in a new universe with no way home, Arnold must use his gaming skills to figure out how to level his farmer class to 100 and gain a second class which doesn't make him want to beat his head against the wall. There's just one small problem. Farmers don't gain experience from killing monsters, like at all. Follow Arnold's hilarious journey as he stubbornly comes to grips with his new reality and tries to change his destiny from that of your typical farmer. Okay, good description. This is essentially a great reincarnated to the RPG fantasy world story where the main character has the farmer class foisted upon him. His goal to reach 100 levels in the class so he can take a second class that feeds what he thinks a reincarnate should be. Only this system is stacked against him, and he has to figure out every exploit to gain the XP he needs to, which spirals into some truly fun and funky adventure with the emphasis on a kind of trap farmer dungeon being used to lure in increasingly powerful monsters. Beyond the action, there's good character development, town building, and lots of RPG exploitation, and some good world building mid-story that develops some serious villains. This sense of humor, if it lands for you, and it absolutely did for me, I thought this was a very funny story, will have you chuckling throughout. I give it a score of 8 out of 10. That's a great review score for me. That means it just wasn't good. It had something special, and I think it does. I think the part I like the most about it really is kind of this exploitation story where the main character is just going out of his way to figure out any way he can kind of exploit the farmer system, which is, again, intentionally stacked to be super hard to level and to never reach 100, which is when he gets his second class, apparently, or second class choice he can make. And I really like seeing how that expands and develops into this, again, kind of monster dungeon, trap dungeon thing, where he's drawing in the monsters and killing that way, and some other really interesting things with the role-playing. So overall, I think it's a great story. Go check it out. Oh, great, I was reincarnated as a farmer, a LitRPG adventure. Unorthodox Farming, book number 1 with a score of 8 out of 10. Okay, that's it, folks. Thanks for watching. We got 7 reviews for you. We got through them all. I definitely avoid those plagiarized stories if you can. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, our website, and Spotify, Audible, and plenty of other places, but you can always find the podcast at LitRPGpodcast.com, including all our past reviews, over 1,000, I think, at this point. So plenty of stories for you to kind of search through for things that you like. We have a bunch of tags we put in each story that'll link you to other kinds of that story or the other elements. So definitely go check that out. You can also find us on Facebook if you want to say hi. Feel free to send us a message or just post on the page. We always love hearing from viewers and listeners. But until we can hang out again, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.